Sure. So the nerdiest shit imaginable.
All right. So hello everyone. So I'm chatting with Nicholas about whether eating meat is wrong. I think it's very wrong. I think the case against eating meat is quite clear. Nicholas thinks that it's not wrong. So
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I mean, here's one argument for it being wrong. It's wrong to cause vast amounts of suffering for trivial reasons. Eating meat causes vast amounts of suffering for trivial reasons. So eating is wrong. What's wrong with that argument?
I disagree with the premise because it assumes that we should care about non-humans. And
Okay.
so I think non-humans have zero inherent moral value. And frankly, the inherent worth of humanity is simply a rule of thumb to keep us engaged in pro-social cooperative behaviors that benefit everyone. Um, so yeah, I tend to think nothing really has inherent value beyond the self. Zero times zero or zero times anything is still zero. Therefore, we shouldn't care. And as a general premise, I think that utilitarianism is us caring about humans or caring about things that are like humans gone to a place of absurdity. Um, in that we care about things that are akin to us precisely to the degree that they remind us of us, right? We care about what we call consciousness, or simply being like humans, right? And have those arrangement of atoms be better than other arrangement of atoms. And that's the reasoning for why cows are more important than an equivalent number of bacteria, or well, not no I don't know, equivalent mass of bacteria feeding on a dead cow. You know.
Okay, so suppose that we were in factory farming humans.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be extremely morally opposed to that, or would you say basically you don't care about that for like egoist reasons?
I think that such a society would probably have bad results for
Well,
people out on the outside too.
well, let's
For
imagine let's imagine that we were doing it to a specific type of human, so that there was
Mhm.
a specific type of human. I don't know. Let's imagine that we were doing it specifically to Laotian people, and so we just said basically we discovered some holy text that said that Laotian people didn't matter morally. We just all agree as a society, okay,
Mhm.
Laotian people, we're going to viciously torture them, but we're not going to harm other humans. And let's imagine that this social contract was successful. So,
Sure,
for us
I
non-Laotians, presumably,
I
it
think
would
it would
have
be
no negative ripple effects, and it wouldn't have, there was no egoistic reason to be opposed to
mhm.
that. Would you
I
think
think it
that
would
that
be
was
better
seriously
to
morally wrong?
I think it would be better to trade with them. That I think that slavery leads to the stagnation and impoverishment of everyone, not
Well,
just the
but
people
okay,
being extracted from.
so let's just imagine that we had solid evidence that this led to more economic growth. I mean, I agree. I agree with it. As a practical matter, but like it seems like you're pointing out things that are true, but that are just not what would make this wrong. So yes,
Mhm.
sure, it would probably not be conducive to
Yeah,
GDP.
and that's
But
precisely what would make it wrong.
well, no,
Uh,
even if like enslaving Laotian people and viciously torturing them all to death, tens of billions of them each year, even if
mhm,
that was good for GDP, I think
mhm.
it would still be wrong. Do you disagree?
So you know in some of your prior articles, right, that there's an annoying tendency of like if we specify that this action have no negative consequences whatsoever, then you would in theory agree that this very bad action normally is allowable, right? Like
Yeah,
it would
sure.
so I would in principle say that if it is beneficial, then we should do it. The problem is that
Wait,
it is
but it's
basically
just
never
to be clear,
beneficial. So there's
it's not if
no.
it's beneficial. It's that if it's
Mhm,
good for GDP. Like it
mhm.
seems like the thing that makes slavery, torture, mutilation, killing people on a vast scale wrong has nothing to do with its effect on global GDP.
It would
Even if it turned
certainly
out that viciously torturing 78 billion people to death each year was good for GDP, it still seems wrong.
it would
Yeah,
certainly
I mean,
lower GDP per capita. Um,
well, okay, but uh, well, that's true. But
yeah.
but like that doesn't seem to be what makes it wrong. It seems like what makes it wrong is the fact that it's inflicting just tons of unnecessary suffering. But
No, I think that that's simply a shorthand for the like negative consequences, right? We have murder is bad not in and of itself. It's bad because it leads to bad outcomes. That's why when murder leads to good outcomes, say in a justified war, we are quite okay with it, or in self-defense.
but okay, but the reason why we're opposed to murder isn't because it's bad for the GDP. Even if murder was good for the GDP, I think
That's why I'm opposed.
Wait, so let's imagine that it just turned out that we had good evidence that when people were murdered, it made other people really scared and miserable, and then as a result of people being scared and miserable, they worked harder, and that grew the GDP. If that were so, would you then be in favor?
That would be confusing GDP for welfare. GDP is generally a good proxy for welfare, but not necessarily the same. Simply.
Is what you care about aggregate welfare or aggregate GDP?
In most practical questions, I care about GDP per capita because that's quite a bit more measurable, and most of the time it corresponds with good outcomes, right? We would rather people be wealthier, and when they're wealthier, they have more freedom to do whatever they want to do. Notwithstanding that, caring about GDP is just a shorthand for welfare.
Okay, so let's imagine that it turned out that killing lots of but so is the reason why GDP matters because it's a proxy for welfare? So if there was a conflict between so what you care about is aggregate welfare?
Yeah, of course.
And is it only what aggregate welfare of humans, or is it aggregate welfare for beings in general?
What I generally care about for humans. Again, that's just a shorthand for it benefiting me, and I want everyone to very genuinely believe in maximizing benefits for all of humanity, because that sort of cooperative society is better for everyone. As a sort of we want to be in a cooperate equilibrium.
Okay, the reason why you're opposed to things that are bad for other people is because you think that those would tend to promote institutions that are bad for you personally?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say that it just turned out that that your well-being was sort of anti-correlated with. So let's imagine that it just turned out you just discovered that you had this odd skill set wherein in societies that tended to be worse by objective metrics, then in those societies you did better. So you were just the type of person who did well in societies where lots of people were poor. You were good at exploiting various opportunities when there's lots of poverty and crime and so on. Would you then be in favor of poverty, crime, misery, and filth?
That seems unlikely that a much poorer world would make me better off.
But if we just stipulate that you have a set of skills that makes it so that you are better off in a much poorer world.
I imagine that my preferences would be outweighed by the great mass of people who would much prefer greater wealth. Of course, there are problems with democracy in terms that people have policy preferences that would lead to them being worse off. There's a gap between what people privately want and what they were willing to say they want. But that's neither here nor there.
Okay, well, so I think most people just have a sense of morality. Like they'll have a set of moral preferences that don't have to do with the things that are good for them, right?
Yeah, and that's very good, because it is necessary for us to have those and not question them in order that we be made better off.
Well, no, but lots of people think that there's this concept of morality that is distinct from making yourself better off. So they think that you can compare two societies and say that one society is better, even if neither of those societies affect you. So you can say that it would be better if aliens weren't horrifically miserable all the time, even if those aliens had no effect on us and were light years away and so on.
Yeah, we would be happier knowing that they are better off.
I don't think that we would be much happier knowing that aliens a galaxy away were better off. And even if we were, that doesn't.
People are very happy about the existence of polar bears, which they will never see in person.
I don't think that people are that happy about the existence of polar bears. Like if you just look at people's welfare, and then you compare that to people's welfare if they never heard stories about polar bears, I think that they'd be pretty similar.
How much money has been donated to save polar bears? I'm curious.
But I think that when people donate money to save polar bears, they do it not because they think they'll be personally made better off. Instead, they donate money to save polar bears because they think that it's morally good to save polar bears.
Yeah, and that's just making themselves better off because it's
I don't think so. I don't think that people's concept of what's morally good is the same as what would make them better off. So most people think that if their welfare decreased by half to prevent 1 billion people from being viciously tortured to death, that would be a good thing, even if it decreased their welfare.
Mm-hmm. I would think that 1 billion people being killed would probably decrease their welfare by more than that.
Well, if we stipulate that their overall welfare is cut in half, or if we stipulate that they pick between two worlds. World 1, they have higher welfare, and World 2, they have lower welfare, but 1 billion extra people are viciously tortured to death. Or sorry, in World 1, they have slightly higher welfare, but 1 billion extra people are viciously tortured to death.
Yeah,
I think most people would say that even if their welfare were higher in World, I'm actually getting mixed up with the worlds, but they don't care only about their welfare across worlds. They also have distinctly moral preferences. I have no idea why we would think that people can't have moral preferences about things that don't have to do with.
Sure. I think that people do have, they have moral preferences. They're rather deontological, but that those deontological beliefs are simply instruments, ultimately, I mean, to passing themselves on. But I think we can, abstract to, making ourselves better off.
Wait, what do you mean you think that their vehicle is for making ourselves better off?
So we evolve certain beliefs because they are successful at passing on, right?
I agree with that, of course.
We evolve a set of beliefs, in like ancient history, right? That are partly cultural, partly genetic. Like our aversion to corpses and sickness. I'm pretty sure is genetic. Not that there's probably a single gene, but I'd struggle to see. I feel like if somebody sees something rotting and smells bad, smells bad. Yeah, so the whole idea of a bad smell is, Anyway, sorry. We evolved those beliefs. They tend to get frozen in time. So as circumstances change, like a repulsion towards homosexuality can make sense in certain circumstances, but is not necessary now. However, there's still ultimately towards the goal of passing ourselves on.
But
anyway, we've gotten rather far from meat.
But our morality is clearly not. Our morality is clearly not just a byproduct of what passes on our genes. So most people think that even if that's clearly why we have our morality in the first place, because it was effective for passing on our genes in some sense, or at least other faculties that resulted in our morality were desirable for passing on genes. But that's also why mathematics evolved. But that doesn't mean that the correct answer to 1 + 1 to what 1 + 1 equals is whatever would be most likely to increase our reproductive fitness.
I do think that is what the answer to 1 + 1. If it increases our reproductive freedom,
let's imagine that if you answered 1 + 1 is equal 3, you would be more likely to pass on your genes.
No.
Make it so that 1 + 1 was.
I think that 1 + 1 equals 2, and thinking that the answer to mathematics is what it is now does make us better off. If it were for any reason correct to give a wrong answer, then we would choose to believe the wrong answer, and that's what truth is.
I don't think we can choose
what we decide.
I don't think that we can choose what we believe.
Really? If that were the case, then why are we debating beliefs?
Well, we can argue about what we believe, but I couldn't choose to believe that 1 + 1 were equal to 3. Could you choose to believe that the Earth was flat 1 second from now?
If it was necessary, I don't see how we would benefit from it. Beliefs are just instruments to the goal of making of myself better off, right?
Well, no, but okay. So I don't think that's true. But even if that were true, that doesn't automatically give us the faculties for believing whatever we want to believe.
Fair enough. Well, I'm pretty sure in that great historical documentary, 1984. I kid. I'm sorry.
But I mean, so look. I mean, you can just so let's imagine that you were in the United States when there was slavery. And let's imagine that we just had very good data. Let's imagine that more advanced studies were done. They had more sophisticated econometrics models. And it just turned out that that enslaving Black people was on average good for white people. Would you then be in favor? And let's say it was good for you in particular. Would you then say that slavery was fine?
If you want to, assert as a, if you want to say that something that is not true is in fact true as a part of the hypothetical, right? Then I would not have a problem with it. The whole problem is that it's bad because it makes us worse off. There's a reason that the South was the poorest region.
We can imagine possible worlds in which slavery was good for the economy.
One in which I guess the North was the backwater instead of the South, but that's not the case.
Let's imagine that it benefited white people only very slightly. Then would you be okay with slavery?
No, the whole point is that it doesn't. It doesn't benefit white people.
I know, but if it did, then would you be okay with it?
Yeah, sure. But again, you're
okay. The thing is, you're just getting the order of explanation totally wrong. The reason why slavery is bad is because it causes vast amounts of unnecessary suffering. It's not because it's bad for white people. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I tend to think that it probably is. But even if it weren't, it would still be bad.
Okay. Antiseptic is bad for bacteria. Do you support killing quite a lot of bacteria with antiseptic? Yeah. So I guess you're simply saying that the forms of bacteria are worth more because they're much less akin to humans, right?
No, it's not because they're less akin to humans. It's because they can't experience well-being or suffering.
Yeah, the whole well-being and suffering business is simply akinness to humans.
No, it's not. There are beings that are much more. If there was a being that was exactly like a human but was not conscious, I wouldn't care about them at all. If there was a being that was totally unlike humans in all respects, except it could suffer, I would care about it a lot.
Okay. I guess can you prove
that? So I have a few more reductives. Suppose that it turned out that men were made on average better off by just viciously abusing women, but only a little bit. Just to be clear, the only little bit was that men were only made a little bit better off by really horrifically abusing women, such that 25% of women died. If that were so, would you then be in favor of viciously abusing women? Let's imagine that it turned out that we had evidence that made them more productive or better at taking care of children or something like that.
It's really great that it's not actually the case. Like I guess a whole lot of.
But just if it were the case, then would you be in favor of it?
I mean, in principle, no. Like the whole this is akin to you having. I remember there being a debate with you and I think it was a Christian of some variety of suppose a rape occurs of which there's no memory and no harm and no physical damage of any kind, and then once you stipulate that there is no harm whatsoever, then it becomes okay. And then
we're not stipulating here that there's no harm whatsoever. We're stipulating that there's tons of harm, but that harm just affects people that aren't you.
So you're stipulating that something that is not so is, and that would probably change my answer.
Yes,
but the whole point is that it is in fact not, and so I don't have to, say that it is. It isn't. That is all.
So let's imagine that so my desk is not red. Let's imagine you said that if my desk was red, then it would be okay to torture people. I could say, look, I know my desk isn't red, but even if my desk was red, it seems wrong to torture people. Therefore, the principle that if my desk is red, then it's wrong to torture people is false. The fact we can obviously use counterfactuals in order to suss out our moral intuitions.
Your desk being red is not my only guiding moral principle. We should make people better off.
I was using that as an analogy.
Yeah, but it's not analogous because one of them is a principle that I care about, and the other one is not.
Okay, but so the point is just this was just establishing that we can like care to some degree, or
I think we're very similar in terms of actual policy prescriptions, except where it comes to veganism.
yes, you care about
open borders. Like the single biggest thing is opening the borders precisely because it makes everyone better off. Same with free trade.
I agree that we're very often in agreement about policy prescriptions because you're in favor of things that improve human welfare, but also your welfare, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Human welfare as a vehicle for improving your own welfare.
Yeah, that's the best way to go about it. Because a whole bunch of people scrabbling for, their own welfare through defecting makes everyone worse off. Sorry, I need to respond to a.
I mean, so one thing is like there seem to be lots of things that are bad that are not bad for you, right? So like, say a person just murders their wife in Indonesia. You don't know this person. You'll never meet them. Do you think that's morally bad?
Murder makes everyone worse off.
This murder doesn't make. Maybe murder in general makes.
Murder in general does, and that's why we should punish it just the same.
Right, but
I'm probably not going to have much of an emotional reaction because if I did have an emotional reaction to
this specific murder doesn't make everyone worse off. This specific murder doesn't make you worse off at all. You'll never find out about it. You're not affected by it at all.
So hold up. So you're saying that she would otherwise have been totally cloistered from humanity and have consumed no resources had she not been murdered?
Well, no, she wouldn't have consumed no resources.
Then she would have an effect on all of us.
No, the average person worldwide has no effect on you. Most people are engaged in some transaction somewhere, but most people are not engaged in any transactions with you personally.
That's simply it would simply be a very small impact on me, but not undetectable.
No, I don't think it would be any impact at all. But okay, yeah, we can change the scenario slightly. Let's imagine
you would have to imagine either that she has no interactions with anyone else, right? Or she has a small cloistered set of interactions and there are no spillovers to anyone else, right? If it spills over the entire world, then it affects everyone, right?
Okay, let's imagine. Okay, I think that this is clearly wrong, but even if we grant this, let's imagine that somewhere far away, in Indonesia, there's a person who's on their deathbed, but they're still conscious, and someone goes and they inflict vast amounts of pain on them for no good reason. No one else finds out about it. It has no negative consequences. They never do anything like this again. And so it has no negative effect on you because this person's, about to die. This is 1 hour before their death. Doesn't affect how they consume resources. Doesn't affect anything like that. Mm-hmm. Are you morally opposed to that?
It seems highly unlikely that they would actually have no effect on their behavior. I'm against such things precisely because, people who do that are apt to be very dangerous.
Let's imagine that there are two terminally ill people. One terminally ill person inflicts a vast amount of suffering on the other terminally ill person. But both of them die before it has any effect on anyone else. Are you morally opposed to that?
I guess if there's enough exceptions to make it sound like Moses Maimonides trying to, or is it Moses Maimonides? I don't know. Trying to avoid having to stone teenagers for disrespecting their parents. I mean, sure. There's a biblical commandment to stone people who disrespect their parents, and so the whole challenge is to find some interpretation that gets you out of it. Moses Maimonides did it by Maimonides. Damn it! So this is the trouble with reading things and never hearing it pronounced. Like narrowing it down so it has to be in a 30-day window between them achieving a certain amount of maturity and also them not becoming too old to become an adult, and there has to be multiple witnesses and they have to agree that it was formed and the effect is
so before they're stoned, it's that they have to say they're a drunkard and a glutton. That's in the original text. So to do that, they had to drink like a dozen bottles of wine and consume like a pound of food or something. And that's pretty funny, the way that people burned out of it. But I have no idea how that has anything to do with what I said.
So I guess the point is that if you want to construct an unrealistic scenario in which would happen, in principle, I have nothing against it. In practice, I very much do, because those stipulations are highly unrealistic.
But look, I mean, there have to be things that don't affect you at all worldwide that you think are bad.
That's preposterous.
Everything is bad that doesn't affect you.
Everything affects me to some degree. It's simply very minute.
Okay, that doesn't have any discernible effect on you.
Then,
I mean, like everything affects you, and then it affects like the way your wave function in some way.
Yes. Yes. But and if it affects me negatively, even if minutely, if a singular murder in Indonesia discourages economic activity ever so slightly, or prevents this person from working, or what have you, or causes people to fear, that will eventually have a very minute negative effect.
There are clearly lots of bad things that happen that, to the extent that they have an effect on you, are good for you, right? Mm-hmm. So let's imagine that a husband, beats their wife for not working hard enough. And so this leads to slightly more economic growth. Mm-hmm. Are you in favor of that?
No, because I think a society that does that is going to be worse off.
But we're not evaluating a society that does that. We're evaluating that thing in a vacuum.
Well, the whole point is that it's not going to happen in a vacuum. There's got to be accompanying circumstances that we should choose to not punish that behavior. What happens if we choose not to punish that behavior to society?
I mean, there's a difference between whether some behavior should be punished and whether some behavior is bad. If we imagine that behavior happening in a vacuum, even if it would be bad if done on a societal level, it still seems like, that wouldn't be bad for you, even though it would be bad overall.
I mean, you could have an argument.
It's that just literally nothing can be bad unless it's bad for you personally.
Kind of. It's pretty much that, provided we take the view that we've got to engage in cooperation, and that sort of self-sacrificing behavior is actually best off for us.
So I mean, there are people who burned to death in fires and burning buildings.
Yes.
Or let's take the example of the people who died on 9/11.
Yes.
I think that it would be worse if it took longer to die and if they suffered more. But that has no effect on me. It has, they didn't, however long it took them to die, that has no effect on anyone outside of outside of the building, right?
This is assuming that I'm alive and perceiving at the time of 9/11.
Wait, actually, yeah. Do you think that there were things that were bad before you were born?
To me personally, it doesn't matter. What does that tell us about the future?
Well, okay. I mean, so it seems like your moral view is just very bankrupt. If it involves saying that if slavery was good for you personally, then slavery would be morally okay. If it, boosted GDP and such.
Yeah, the good thing they said it isn't.
Well, same thing. I know, but you can have counterfactuals as scenarios in which a person's judgments are implausible. It involves saying that things before you were born weren't bad.
Do you think that war is bad?
I think it depends on the war. In general, yes.
Okay. But the thing is like that means that you're okay with certain wars, depending on the circumstances, like whether or not it has good effects.
Yes.
And I think that caring
about... I'm not okay with wars that have good effects for me. If there was a war that killed lots of people and caused lots of unnecessary suffering, even if it didn't harm me, it would still be a bad thing.
I think that, that sort of war would probably be incredibly destructive.
Well, let's imagine that the war happened
and make
us light years away, so I never found out about it.
Well, yeah, then that's completely irrelevant. You don't perceive it.
Right, but I still think it's bad.
Are we currently... fair enough. I think it's a matter of complete indifference whether or not wars are happening a billion light years away. We have to perceive something to be harmful.
I mean, basically, you can adopt, for any moral view that you want to adopt, you can adopt it, as long as you're willing to bite the bullets. And you seem to be willing to bite the associated bullets, including that if slavery were, good for GDP and good for you personally.
Yeah, but the whole point is that it's not.
Okay, but if it were, then you'd be in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, if slavery were a necessary condition of the Industrial Revolution, which it is not, thankfully, although there's a big scholarly debate on how important the slavery was to the Industrial Revolution. I mean, frankly, you would probably agree that the good of the Industrial Revolution greatly outweighs the harm of slavery. Thank goodness, then, that slavery was not a necessary precondition.
I don't actually know if the good of the Industrial Revolution outweighed the harm of slavery, but maybe
fair enough. You care about animals.
But also, I mean, like, your view is that even if it weren't, necessary for the Industrial Revolution, if it just benefited you and white people generally very slightly, then slavery would be fine.
Yeah, but
that's very impossible.
It wouldn't. So,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're clearly going in circles. I mean, it just seems like you have a moral view. It's consistent. It's just obviously false. It involves saying crazy things. So I don't think that there's. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's too much more to say. Your moral view commits you to things that strike me as very implausible, and I think will strike basically everyone watching this as very implausible.
Well, that's quite possible.
And so, I don't know if there's too much more to say on the subject. I mean, if you think factory farming is just as bad as slavery in worlds where it slightly benefits white people, and wars that happened before you were born that caused unnecessary suffering, but didn't affect you.
I mean, the moral goodness or badness of things that happen before I'm born is kind of unimportant. I mean, like, what's it going to change?
Wait, actually, it seems like with nearly all of bad things that happened before you were born, they were good for you, because if it weren't for those bad things, you wouldn't have existed in the first place.
Nonsense. I would be perfectly happy as a slightly different arrangement of atoms.
Wait, so in
what sense? If I wasn't alive,
so like
if I was never born, I would not be harmed, because I wouldn't be around to perceive the harm. Simple as. I have to perceive something to be harmed. And if I die, I'm not harmed by that.
Okay. So yeah, if we agree that factory farming is, if we all agree that factory farming is as bad as holocausts happening a galaxy away that we'll never find out about, then I think that's a decent place to end things. I think that Holocaust galaxy away that we never find out about is bad. But if you think that it's not bad, but that it's just as bad as factory farming, then I think basically most people who have, I think, fairly normal sets of moral intuitions will think that.
Well, no, I have a fairly normal set of moral intuitions. I've had to reason myself out of them, right? In the search for something that is very consistently.
What reasoning led you to conclude that it's not bad to cause vast amounts of unnecessary suffering?
So I want to avoid arbitrarity, right? I want to avoid a priori beliefs, right? And the only thing that I think I can track down, very, very solidly, is that, I, whatever I am, the collection of atoms, do in fact want things, right? And that's the ultimate source of arbitrarity, and it's the minimum source of arbitrarity I can find. And so I think that all of our moral commandments, right, can be successfully justified, starting from the premise of, I want, right, and starting from that premise alone, right, and that something like utilitarianism that cares about other, like species, for example, is a general rule. We should care about humans, right? Gone haywire, right? We like mammals because we call it, suffering or, or qualia. But like, how could we possibly grasp, the internal perception of organisms?
I mean, sorry to cut you off, but you're saying sort of a lot of things that I disagree with. Yeah, I think that we can know various facts about other organisms by doing neuroscience.
Would you say I mean, that can't tell us anything about the internal perceptions. That can show, it being akin to us in certain ways, but we can't ever really know how they perceive. Much the same way we can't, know that a color means the same thing to different people, right?
But we can have pretty good evidence for it, which is just that just our best explanation of the
Oh,
way that
certainly,
consciousness works would involve.
oh,
I mean,
certainly.
I agree we can't know it with certainty, but I basically don't think we can know anything with
Do
certainty.
you think that we can have, revealed preference be a guide to what things want, right? So if something eats, then it prefers eating, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept of revealed preferences, and I think that
Yeah.
that's generally a pretty good guide. By the way, I
If
will have to go in like 20 minutes.
okay, if something digests, it wants to digest in the same sense,
Oh,
that it.
I don't think that's true.
So I guess
Because when
I
does it
don't know.
choose whether or
Do
not
we
to get
disagree on free
revealed?
will? I assume because I see atoms as having the same amount of free will everywhere, no matter how they are arranged. That a necessary precondition of free will would be atoms uh, taking arbitrary paths, and beyond that, uh, I view the future as just as much happened as the past. That it is all one necessarily unbreakable chain of events. We don't know what it is, and so from our perspective, we act as though we have free will. That's all fair. It has no bearing on human morality, right? Um, More or less. Uh, just that any difference in the future from what would happen would require some sort of prior event to have happened differently, and so on ad infinitum.
So, just do you believe in free will?
No.
Okay, I don't. I mean, I'm sort of undecided between compatibilism and the no free will view, but I'm happy to grant that there's no free will for the sake of
So
argument.
yeah, seeing all atoms as having the same amount of free will, there's really no difference between a brain coming to certain decisions to do something and, say, a stomach releasing stomach acid and contracting and expanding to push, uh, grass down, right? Like
I
thinking
don't
of a
think that
cow,
that's
right?
true. Like, I think that we have faculties for reasoning and thinking about things in a way that doesn't apply to the stomach contrasting or contracting.
So that
You know,
would be like
I,
that you're.
I even if we don't believe in free will, we still think that people make choices. Now, maybe we think those choices are ultimately predetermined,
Of
but
course they are.
that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that people don't make choices. And so that would be the relevant distinction
Well,
between.
we have things that are. So I think what choices mean are things that are influenced by incentives, right? There is no incentive, at least. Well, I mean there is. We could, for example, if you poison a human, their digestion will cease, um, which is simply your stomach responding to incentives, just the same as your brain doing so. So I view all the atoms as being equal with each other. Um, so when something does something, it shows its preference for doing that, right?
Wait, I just I
That
disagree
was a
with
lot.
basically every step of this. I don't think that stomachs don't make choices. They don't have brains.
I don't know. I just see that as like things have choices in as far as they extend to us. Like, would you say that like I don't know? Perhaps we'll delve into unrealistic hypotheticals. Let us say that there is an alien race that does not have brains, but they come to decisions like the ability to make decisions is disseminated throughout their parts, right? A truly alien creature. Um, they'd be making choices. No.
I mean, so I think that the precise conditions under which one can make choices are sort of hard to parse. Maybe one has to be conscious, maybe not. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. The exact point at which I'd say that something's making a choice. But it certainly would not apply to like stomachs.
Oh, so and I guess
I
my
don't. It wouldn't have to have exactly a brain, but it would have to have either a brain or something like it. But
mhm.
it would maybe have to be conscious. I'm not. I'm not quite sure.
uh Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a sec. Let me get back on topic. Um Yeah, I guess in that's a fundamental point of disagreement. From my point of view, um, I see us valuing the decisions made by brains higher than the decisions made uh, by other parts of the body, right? Or by atoms themselves to be kind of elevating things that are akin to humans, right? To be higher than things that are not akin to humans.
I don't think that atoms make decisions, nor do I
No,
think.
of course not. That's why I don't believe in free will. But the thing is, you have to consistently apply that and say that all things atoms don't make decisions, right? And that includes brains, and that includes stomachs. You know,
No, denying free will doesn't mean that brains don't make decisions. It just means those decisions are predetermined. That we don't choose the decisions in the ultimate sense.
hmm
But that doesn't mean that there are no decisions.
hmm hmm
I mean, virtually no one who denies, no one that I know of who denies free will thinks that people don't make any decisions.
Okay. Um, well, in one sense, we don't. In a practical sense, we do. Um, you know, and that's how it be. Uh, Yeah, though. I guess the general conclusion to the argument is that growing is demonstrating a preference for growing, and it's much better from the perspective of the atoms that make up an animal to grow and live than to not grow and live at all. If it were actually worse from the perspective of the atoms, um, they would choose not to do it. Um,
I don't think atoms can make choices. I think that yeah, I think you need to have something like a brain in order to make choices. Not a brain specifically, but you need to be able to consider the relevant option and not just be, following laws, formulaically,
mhm.
in a way that leads to no emergent or higher, more complex structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are pretty much my views with regards to utilitarianism.
Wait, so
I
why does that mean that it's not wrong to inflict vast amounts of suffering for trivial reasons? And by the way, you don't have to be a utilitarian to think that.
mhm.
That just seems obvious. I think to most people that it's wrong to cause vast amounts of suffering for trivial reasons. We just
because
consider what suffering's like.
because I think that is arbitrary, and it
Um,
is not supported.
why isn't only caring about
And so
yourself arbitrary?
it, because that is the least amount of arbitrarity that one can have.
Why
Right?
isn't
I,
why
I
isn't
will
it
care about myself no matter what happens. I cannot help but do that. Right? If you didn't, in fact, care about yourself at all, you would like waste away. Well, you'd probably die of dehydration first. Right?
well, what you can care about is doing good generally, and then you'll care
Yeah.
about yourself and other people.
Yeah. And I think that's a very good set of mental beliefs to have.
Okay, but if you care about
I
doing
just
good
think
generally,
that caring about
but
animals,
you don't have that set of beliefs, given that you don't care about doing good for animals.
but not about animals, no.
Okay, why?
Precisely for the same reason that
Why is it? Or,
same reason I do not care about fetuses. I cannot become a fetus, and
do you care about babies?
no, about babies,
Because you
it,
can't
it,
become a baby.
it depends at what age and also what happens.
Do you care about 9-year-old children?
Yes, because they would be able to perceive and then be in fear of the possibility of being killed, and that would negatively affect them. I don't see much of a difference between aborting a baby a week before they are born and a week after they are born. In both cases, they are incapable of fearing, and so if they live, there'll be no negative no negative result from that. And I just realized that there are live stream comments. So to less is more. Oh, that's not a name. That's a pun. Okay. Now that I said it aloud, that makes more sense. Anyway, sorry. Caring about oneself and animals can be in conflict with each other.
Yeah, but so why is it any less arbitrary to care about yourself than to care about animals and
Like,
yourself and humans?
so I see both of them as ultimately being instruments for the benefit of the self.
But why? Wait, caring about yourself is an instrument for the benefit of the self?
No. Sorry. Caring about animals, caring about humans. Sorry. So, since you said the two of them, that's what I meant.
So you're only motivated by like you only care about yourself, and you think that people who care about things other than themselves are being irrational in some way, right? They're being arbitrary.
Depends. It's a very I think it's perfectly fine if people are rational in ways that benefit society. I certainly behave in a very pro-social way. There's really no reason for me to donate to like effective altruism, but I do so anyway. Notwithstanding, um, they could probably consume that. Um, you know, the buying of, I guess it's almost buying of indulgences of sort of though. Yeah, so one cares about other humans because that puts us into pro-social and cooperative behaviors that benefit others.
Why is it arbitrary? Well, so just the question is, why is it arbitrary to care about animals and others, but it's not arbitrary to care about yourself?
Because I am born with the inherent desire to care about myself.
And you said you were born with having other
motivations
that you rid yourselves of because you didn't think that they were arbitrary.
Sure. I get thirsty anyway, and the compulsion of being thirsty outweighs the compulsion of other things.
But
I don't disagree.
But you also do other things that are not just simple compulsions, like presumably you plan for retirement. And so why, when you're planning for retirement, you think, I care about myself in the far future. Why do you care about why is it arbitrary to care about other people, and other animals and stuff, but not arbitrary to care about yourself in the far future?
Well, because I care about myself in the far future. I mean, it's arbitrary for the same way. It's arbitrary in the same way that me caring about myself in the present is arbitrary, right? I know that in the future I will grow hungry and thirst. So just as I would now. So
and you
I
also
plan
know
for the
that
future.
Animals will grow hungry and thirst.
So for less is more, I would care if I saw murder or rape occurring, and I would certainly call the police, if not try and stop it myself. Probably more stop itself for the rape than the murder. I may be more inclined to run away in the case of a murder while also calling the police. It makes not sense. If you know the pain of bleeding from a cut, then you should feel compassion for an animal that dies at the blade of a butcher. Okay.
But I mean, earlier you said that
yes,
you had other moral intuitions. There were other things that you cared about, but then you stopped caring about them
because I'm trying.
They were arbitrary, and so it can't be that you didn't care. It can't be just that you did care about that you do happen to care about yourself, and you don't happen to care about others.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I have an even greater intuition to want to be consistent. Okay, and to have everything be ordered.
Cared about themselves and others, including animals. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they're being irrational? And if so, what mistake are they making?
No, they simply have different preferences than I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just have preferences. Okay. Yeah. So if it's just a question of preferences, then I think most people have preferences for things that don't affect me. I have preferences. I also am a moral realist on top of that. But I think that's a bigger dispute and is not at all relevant to the topic.
Yeah, what is a moral realist?
What?
What is a moral realist exactly?
I think morality is objective.
Huh. Yeah, no, I can't get behind that at all.
But I think even if you're not a moral realist, I think most people have a set of preferences that care about others, that care about
it can be objective only given axioms, right? That it can be objective given a certain condition, you know. I think. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I have
Yeah,
an
no.
article on the subject that you can read, but
Yes. Sorry, there's quite a lot of them. I must apologize for not having read all of them.
no worries. But yeah, no, I mean, I basically think that most people will care. Well, if they reflect, will conclude that causing vast amounts of suffering for trivial reasons is something that they don't like, that they don't approve of. Most people will conclude that abusing animals is something that they don't approve of, and you don't have those intuitions.
Yeah, by and large, I'm against abusing animals. Like I think that we should arrest people who abuse their dogs because such individuals are dangerous.
On a mass scale.
Factory farmers are not more likely to commit crimes.
It seems like most people are opposed to torture. Even if it turned out there was a person who, when they torture dogs, it made them more peaceful. I think most people would think that was wrong.
Seems unlikely. I would oppose it because it seems unlikely, not because it's right or wrong.
Even if we did a brain scan somehow and knew that it wouldn't make them more prone to violence.
That'd be a weird form of therapy, but I'd be behind it.
Okay. I don't think most people would, but yeah, I said I had to go around now.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for chatting. Talk to you later.
Okay.
Thanks for watching, everyone.